August 20th, 1989, Beverly Hills. A warm summer night in one of America's wealthiest neighborhoods. At 674 North Elm Drive, a 911 call comes in. The caller is 21-year-old Lyle Menendez. His voice is frantic, desperate. "Someone killed my parents," he screams into the phone. His 18-year-old brother Erik is heard wailing in the background. When police arrive, they find José and Kitty Menendez dead on the den floor. Shotgun blasts, close range. What looks like a professional hit. But within months, the investigation would take a sharp turn, and the Menendez brothers would go from grieving sons to primary suspects in one of the most sensational murder cases in American history. José Menendez was a self-made man. Born in Cuba, he fled to the United States as a teenager. He worked his way up from nothing. By 1989, he was a powerful executive at RCA Records, worth an estimated $14 million. His wife Kitty was a former beauty queen, a socialite who'd given up her own ambitions to raise their two sons. On paper, the Menendez family was the American dream. But behind the gates of their Beverly Hills mansion, something was deeply wrong. The night of August 20th began like any other. José and Kitty were watching a movie in the den, The Spy Who Loved Me. Their sons, Lyle and Erik, had been out earlier that day. They'd driven to San Diego. They'd purchased 2 Mossberg shotguns from a sporting goods store. Erik used a friend's stolen ID. Around 10:15 p.m., Lyle and Erik walked into the den. They were carrying loaded shotguns. José looked up. What happened next was swift and brutal. José was shot 6 times. The fatal round hit the back of his head. Kitty tried to crawl away across the floor. Lyle paused to reload. Then he fired the final shot into her face. 18 shotgun blasts in total. After the shooting, the brothers staged the scene. They dropped the spent shells on the ground to make it look like an ambush. They left the house, disposed of their bloody clothes, and buried the shotguns along Mulholland Drive. Then they went to the movies. They tried to buy tickets for Batman to create an alibi, but the theater time-stamped its tickets, so they abandoned the plan. When they returned home, there were no police. Nobody had heard the gunshots. So Lyle made the call himself. He ran outside screaming as officers pulled up. The performance had begun. At first, detectives believed Lyle's story. A mob hit, a business deal gone wrong. José Menendez had connections in the music industry. He'd made enemies. But something didn't add up. The brothers started spending money. And fast. Lyle bought a Rolex, a Porsche. He invested in a restaurant. Erik hired a tennis coach and traveled to tournaments. They dropped over $700,000 in just a few months. That's a lot of grief spending. Then police spoke to Glenn Stevens, a friend of Lyle's from Princeton. Stevens told detectives something strange. A week after the murders, Lyle had driven back to the family home to delete something from the computer. A new will. José had recently updated it. The new version reportedly left the brothers less than the original. Lyle hired a computer expert to make sure the deletion was permanent. That was the first crack in the facade. The second crack came from inside the brothers' own camp. Erik had been seeing a psychologist named Jerome Oziel. In therapy sessions, Erik confessed everything. The planning, the shooting, the cover-up. Dr. Oziel recorded these sessions on tape. He later told his mistress, Judalon Smith, everything. When Smith and Oziel broke up, she went straight to the police. On March 8, 1990, Lyle Menendez was arrested outside the Beverly Hills mansion. He looked calm, almost relieved. 3 days later, Erik turned himself in after flying back from a tennis tournament in Israel. They were charged with first-degree murder. The district attorney announced he would seek the death penalty. The brothers were held without bail, separated in the Los Angeles County Jail, and the case was about to explode into a media frenzy. The first trial began in July 1990. Court TV broadcast it live. America was hooked. This was the O.J. Simpson case before O.J. Simpson. The prosecution had a simple argument: greed. The brothers killed their parents for the money. Pure and simple. They wanted the $14 million estate. The spending spree proved it. The deleted will proved it. Prosecutor Pamela Bozinich argued that the abuse allegations were lies invented by the brothers to escape responsibility. But the defense had a very different story. Leslie Abramson, Erik's attorney, and Jill Lansing, Lyle's attorney, didn't deny the killings. They admitted them, but they argued self-defense. Not self-defense against a physical attack in that moment, but self-defense born from years of fear, years of abuse. The brothers testified for days. They described a childhood of horror. José Menendez, they said, began sexually abusing Lyle when he was 6 years old. The abuse continued for years. When Erik reached the same age, the abuse shifted to him. They testified that their father was a cruel perfectionist who berated them constantly, that he would lock them in rooms, that he threatened to kill them if they ever told anyone. Their mother, Kitty, they said, knew about the abuse, and she did nothing. She was an alcoholic, addicted to prescription drugs, emotionally unstable. According to the brothers, she enabled the abuse and sometimes participated in the cruelty. The most dramatic moment came when Erik described the final confrontation. He said their father closed the den door, which was unusual. They believed their parents were going to kill them, to silence them about the abuse, so they loaded their shotguns. And they fired first. The testimony was raw, emotional, and deeply divisive. The courtroom was packed every single day, but the prosecution pushed back hard. They pointed out the inconsistencies. The brothers had claimed they didn't remember parts of the night. Then they remembered more details later. The shopping for shotguns 2 days before, the reload to finish off Kitty, the cover-up, the spending. The prosecution argued this wasn't the behavior of abused children acting in fear. This was cold-blooded, premeditated murder. When the first trial ended in January 1994, both juries were deadlocked. One jury was split 10-2 in favor of manslaughter. The other was split 8-4, also leaning toward manslaughter. Mistrials were declared. The case had to be retried. The second trial began in October 1995, and this time everything was different. Judge Stanley Weisberg made several critical rulings. First, he allowed a single jury to hear both cases. Second, and more importantly, he severely limited the defense's ability to present evidence of abuse. Key witnesses were excluded. Testimony about the extent of the sexual abuse was cut short, and the judge ruled that the jury could not consider imperfect self-defense as a basis for manslaughter. This was devastating for the brothers. The imperfect self-defense doctrine was the cornerstone of their case. It would have allowed the jury to reduce the charge from murder to voluntary manslaughter if they believed the brothers genuinely, even if unreasonably, feared for their lives. Without it, the jury had only two choices: first-degree murder or acquittal. An acquittal was never going to happen. Lyle did not testify in the second trial. The prosecution would have introduced evidence that he tried to coach witnesses during the first trial. So he stayed silent. Erik testified, but without the full context of abuse, his testimony lost much of its power. The prosecution was relentless. They brought in experts who challenged the defense's psychological claims. They highlighted the planning, the shotguns purchased in advance, the alibi attempts, the cover-up. On March 20th, 1996, after just 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty, 2 counts of first-degree murder, special circumstances of lying in wait. In July 1996, Judge Weisberg sentenced both brothers to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For nearly 3 decades, the Menendez brothers remained behind bars. They filed appeals. They filed habeas corpus petitions. The California Supreme Court denied them. The Ninth Circuit denied them. Every door seemed closed. But in 2023, something shifted. Roselló, a former member of the boy band Menudo, came forward. He stated that José Menendez had sexually assaulted him when he was 14 years old. This corroborated the brothers' long-standing claims about their father. Around the same time, a letter Erik had written to his cousin Andy Cano in 1988 was rediscovered. In the letter, Erik described his father's abuse and his fear. The letter was written a full year before the murders. It was powerful evidence that the abuse was real, not something invented after the fact. These developments sparked a wave of public support. Over 24 family members formed a coalition calling for the brothers' release. The case became a cultural touchstone again. Documentaries were made, social media campaigns launched. In May 2028, Los Angeles Superior Court Judge Michael Jessic resentenced both brothers to 50 years to life. Because they were under 26 at the time of the crimes, they became immediately eligible for parole. Parole hearings were scheduled for August 2025. For the first time in 30 years, the Menendez brothers had a real chance at freedom. The Menendez case forces us to ask a difficult question. Were these two brothers cold-blooded killers who murdered their parents for money? Or were they victims of years of abuse who finally snapped in a moment of genuine fear? The legal system gave one answer, but the debate continues. What do you think? Was justice served in the Menendez case? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more deep dives into the cases that define American justice, hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot more to cover.